What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? They learned important lessons on the fields and courts of their high school and collegiate sports teams. This is true for both men and women. Ernst & Young found that a whopping 94% of women holding a C-suite position played sports. Their wins and losses shaped their habits and who they would become. Join me on my journey to sit with some of the brightest executives in the world as we discuss how sports shaped their professional trajectory in life. I'm your host, Don Yeager, and this is Corporate Competitor Podcast. With me for today's episode is Fred Perpall, CEO of the Beck Group, voted one of 2020's best managed companies and best places to work. Fred, known for his creativity and community involvement, began his career in the design and construction industry in 1996 and has been a registered architect since 2003. He grew up in the Bahamas and was involved in sports at an early age. He turned down 5 track and field scholarships for 1 in basketball. And today, we will discuss the lessons he learned as a member of the 1994 Bahamian National basketball team.
People that do not know each other can never truly trust each other. And people that don't trust each other can never do well together. And so we have to actually cultivate time. And I think that's the biggest challenge in a corporate environment versus a sports environment. In a sports environment, we have so much downtime to actually truly get to know each other. In business, the people responsible for the team need to find ways to cultivate environments where people get to spend a lot of time together so that they know each other, so that they can learn to trust each other.
Fred, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
Well, we are honored and we know how valuable your time is. And so I would love to jump in quick and try to gain as much insight as we can from the time we have together. One of the things that struck me as I was reading about you was that your college basketball career actually started at the age of 15.
Yeah.
Because you were in the Bahamas, your native Bahamas, and you went to the University of Bahamas and began playing even at that young age. There's such a physical difference between 15 and 18-year-olds. What was that like to be thrown into collegiate basketball environment at that young age?
Well, I think, starting college so young, I look back at it now and I reflect, I didn't feel so young, but looking back now, having a 16-year-old of my own, I realize how young that really was. I think starting college at 15 and being in a hyper-competitive athletic environment at that age caused me to grow up really fast, to take responsibility, sort of for my own actions. And in many ways, having teammates that were 18, the University of the Bahamas at the time was really more of a prep school environment. You'd play 2 years, and then most of us were transferred to larger Division I schools. And the plan for me was to sit out my first year and then play 2 years there. But being around the older guys really showed me, one, I had to grow up a little faster. 2, take personal responsibility. So no one was going to tell me where I needed to be. I needed to learn, sort of to be disciplined and to follow a regimen. And most importantly, I think at 15, I learned the power of great routines. The notion that if you just follow through on very practical routines, that just having a great routine in itself would yield a certain amount of effectiveness. And so I was fortunate to finish high school very young and start my adult life very early. And I think it's been a big part of my early success in life.
What kind of routines did you learn at that young? I mean, my son is not far from 15, and if I could get him to make his own bowl of cereal, that would be an amazing routine. I mean, what kind of routine are you learning at 15 there in a collegiate environment?
One of the things I preach in my business life is the power of routines, and I'm a big routine guy. I would tie that right back to, sort of my early teenage years. Starting in high school and then definitely my first few years at college. We woke up at 3:30 every morning for morning workouts. To be great at 3:30 in the morning, to be starting your strength and conditioning at 4 a.m. every morning, took a ton of preparation the night before, getting to bed on time, having all of your clothes for the day laid out, including your sports gear and your school gear. The power of organization, actually having your things in the right spot so that packing your bag for the day would be very efficient, putting things where they should be. Just this overall organizational effectiveness in your personal life, which actually catapults to your athletic success, and I think has been transferable to my life in general. So I think the power of routine for me was really about preparation, about organization, and about the discipline to actually repeat and to follow through.
Every day.
When I think about it, Don, like how great of a gift has that been for my overall life?
Oh, wow. No kidding. So after a couple of years at the University of Bahamas, you actually do transfer
Yep.
to the University of North Texas there in Dallas. Of all the options, why Dallas? Why there?
Well, I was actually in high school and then my early years in college a much better track and field athlete than I was a basketball athlete. In fact, on my high school track team, out of 80 kids, we have an Olympic gold medal individually.
Wow.
This is a fact, and this is true. We probably have about 6 or 7 individual finalists in track and field in the Olympics, including one of the most accomplished female Olympic sprinters of our time. So we had an extraordinary track program in high school. And we're a very small Episcopal school, but we had a really good track program. And because of that, many of us got very large Division I track offers. But I wanted to play basketball. I was always more attracted to basketball. It was more fun for me. You know, in track and field, you prepare year round in a very grueling way for maybe 8 big meets.
Yeah.
Basketball is something you can do every day. You can do it with your friends if it's 1 or 2 of you. It was always much more collaborative and much more, sort of interconnected with other people, the team sport versus the individual sport. So I was always more attracted to basketball. The University of Texas at Arlington was the one school I thought I could go to a high-performing architecture program as well as play Division I college basketball.
So you knew at that age you wanted to be an architect.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I knew very early on, from maybe 11, 12 years old in my life, that I wanted to be an architect. So I was looking for an opportunity to play basketball at a large school. And I got that opportunity as a walk-on at UTA and to study architecture at a very, top architecture school. And so that was the one that came together both. And turns out, Don, it didn't work out for me to have a long basketball career at UTA. But I thank God every day that I made that decision to actually go.
This is one of those things that's kind of interesting. Was the game played a little differently between the way your teams might have approached it in the Bahamas versus UTA?
Actually, looking back in the Bahamas, we had a much more European style of basketball,
Yeah.
A lot more passing, a lot more what I would call positionless basketball, where everyone could handle the basketball, everyone could shoot it. We ran a lot of offensive sets where people were interchangeable. So as a 6'7" kind of guy, I handled the ball a lot on the perimeter. I also posted up a lot, but we had a very fluid style of basketball. It would be similar to the way the European teams played, the way the Golden State Warriors kind of played.
Right.
When I got to UTA, I would say we had a lot of specialist kind of positions, right? Where our point guard, actually, my story at UTA, I became friends with a few of the players in the summertime, which led to me, sort of having a great opportunity to walk on. In the United States, particularly in the early 90s, these were the Jordan years where, you had guys who were scorers, you had guys who were rebounders, you had post-up guys. It was a much more what I would call segmented and specialty-oriented game. So that would be the difference I would describe in the two games at the time. Interestingly enough, American basketball has now sort of caught up to European basketball, where we have more of that positionless kind of basketball.
Right. A la your Dallas Mavericks right there.
Yes.
It's a really fun team to watch. So I had the chance to listen to your commencement speech from the University of the Bahamas. You shared a story that after your first year there of college, your father actually pulled you aside and what was a real turning point for you and said some very direct words. Would you share some of that with us?
Yeah. So I think the other great advantage in my life has been having wonderful parents who were so disciplined. If I wanted to think and learn about work ethic, I just had to look at my mother and father. They both worked so hard. And yet at 15 years old, I was very happy to be a college student, very sort of freewheeling about my academics. Although I was very serious about sports, I was not mature enough to actually apply the things I was doing in sports to the classroom. So that same methodical attitude about packing the bags early, always being stretched fully, having everything laid out for the day to make sure that you had 2 pairs of socks and you had everything you needed for sports, the same kind of disciplined routine that I was applying in my athletic career, I was not applying in the classroom. And my father pulled me aside after my first year at University of Bahamas, and he said, look, if you're not going to actually apply yourself to your academics, you're not going to make it to college. You're not going to make it through college. So you could just go get a job and quit wasting our money and quit wasting our time. I'd never seen my father that serious. Like, he was very serious that you could just drop out of college right now and go get a job if you're not going to be serious about academics. And Don, it put the fear of God in me. And I think it was the beginning of me really understanding that I could take that same great process system from sports and turn it into a great academic system. The preparation, making notes, always studying, having 2 hours blocked out of quiet time to just revisit notes, making, flashcards, all the same methodical, detailed, disciplined things you'd have to do in studying your playbook. I just brought to the classroom, and it really, made a difference. Don, I went to finish top of my class at the University of Bahamas, something I'm very, very proud of.
Congratulations. You had the rare opportunity to actually represent the nation of the Bahamas playing on the national basketball team in 1994. What did you learn from that experience to compete internationally, what it was going to require of you?
The beautiful gift about the 1994 experience was I learned that I was not going to be a professional basketball player. This was after my first year at UTA, where I'd been working out the entire, sort of 2 semesters and really was applying myself to basketball. Although I kind of sensed that I was not going to actually be able to study architecture and play basketball, I probably was still navigating which way should I go, which one should I choose. Architecture really demands all of your time. We have a system in architecture called Studio, where you have to spend 5 hours or more per week in the classroom working physically on models and drawings and so on and so forth. Those times all occurred during basketball practice. So for me, it would be impossible to actually be on the basketball team and study architecture. The two never met because they both happened at the same time. And you couldn't make those kinds of classes up in the summer. So getting to try out for the 1994 national team for the CARICOM games was really a fun time for me. In fact, I had a really close friend who was 3 years older than me and was finished with college and just about to go play overseas. And we grew up in the same neighborhood, so we would go to practice every day. And I watched the way these guys worked, how they applied themselves. But I also understood that they had gone all in on basketball in the way I was unwilling to go all in on. They bet the farm, so to speak.
Right.
We also had 1 or 2 guys that would go on to have peripheral NBA careers, a few guys who played very long, 8, 9 years in Europe. So we had, legitimate professional basketball players. And I could see the difference. I could see that maybe I didn't have that talent, but maybe I also wasn't willing to sort of go all in the way they went all in.
Right.
And so I loved the experience because sometimes great strategy is knowing what you're not going to do as much as knowing what you're going to do.
Amen to that.
The other part that I loved was by competing with these guys every day, I literally had a true measuring stick as what it would take to be a professional, to actually earn a living playing basketball. And deep down inside, I knew I would not, have everything that it took to actually be a professional. And it really allowed me to hit the eject button a little earlier in life and go pursue my true passion where I could be a professional, which was architecture.
So why architecture? What was it about architecture that so fascinated you at such a young age?
I always loved creativity and I always loved buildings. The buildings we live in truly shape the way we live. The environments we work in truly shape the way we work. And so architecture has always been a passion for me because I know, and even as a young person, I intuitively know that the physical spaces we occupy shape the way we live. And I wanted to use my creativity to actually build environments and design environments where people can have better lives. Growing up in the inner city, I always dreamed of having better places, better resources, and better environments to live in. And I wanted to spend my life creating those environments. And so, I think at the age of 13, I was pretty sure I wanted to be an architect. And I would tell you, it's been an advantage in my life because when you have a singular vision for what you want to achieve and what you actually want to do with your life, it makes it easier to run very hard at it.
Wow.
So for me, that's been an early blessing.
I love that. And what's so cool about it in architecture is that done well, you're not just affecting today's, you're affecting the next 40 years, right?
Yes.
There will be 40 years of occupancy of a building that you are probably getting a chance to impact.
Yeah.
That's a pretty neat thing. You had those track and field scholarship offers coming out of the Bahamas, but you turned them all down. And instead of going directly to college in the United States and focusing on track and field, to come play basketball, was there a team atmosphere aspect of basketball that was exciting to you, or was it literally just the idea of ball in hoop? What was it about basketball that made it so much more attractive to you than even offers to go run track and field immediately?
I think that's a great question. Look, I don't think you can be extraordinary at things you don't enjoy. Like, I loved playing basketball. I still love playing basketball. Like, basketball was the thing I would do when I had nothing else to do. If I could choose anything to do, I would always pick up the basketball. And so even though like my natural talent probably lent more to track and field, basketball was where my joy came from.
Yeah.
I say to young people all the time, choose something you love. You will spend more time doing it because you love it.
Right.
And because you spend more time doing it, you're going to get really good at it. And because you get really good at it, people will reward you for doing it. Even at 18, when I was deciding whether to run track or whether to play basketball, I think instinctively I knew that basketball was the thing I loved. And I went with the love. I went with the passion. I went with the thing that gave me the most joy. And I think a lot of that joy came from, Don, that basketball you did with other people.
Yeah.
That you connected your individual talents with other people's individual talents, and you could make magic happen. The only way to have sustainable success in basketball was to actually connect and do it with other people, to play as a team, to actually be a connected group of people. For me, I think the facilitators model, the light shining on all of us, the sharing of the success has always felt more natural than just the individual glory.
In that answer, you used the word team 3 times, and I love that. I've asked a number of CEOs this question recently. Many people talk about how much they enjoy their team, right? They have a team and they're talking about work. But the truth is, what you really have is a bunch of people wearing the same jersey, right?
Yeah.
They have the same business card. They're not really a team. It's
Yeah.
just a group of individuals who just happen to show up at the same place every day. How do you define the difference between a team and a collection of individuals who might have the same jersey?
Well, I think the first thing for me is to actually be a team, you actually have to have connection to each other. And by connection, I mean you have to know each other deeply. We have to know, what our fears and what our aspirations are. We have to spend time with each other outside of a work environment. We have to learn what your goals are. People always talk about the golden rule. I want to treat people the way I want to be treated. No, I want to treat you the way you want to be treated. And in order to know that, to know how to facilitate, just like in sports, I've got to know where you like to get the basketball.
Right.
If we're going to be really successful, the more we play together, I'm going to start to understand some things about you that you might not even understand about yourself. So the way I think about a team is really, first off, a deep understanding of each other. Secondly, I think we have to have a vision for collective success. Like when we think about teams, we think about how do we actually create an environment where collectively we're much better than each other or individually. And so we set aspirations that are things that we could not achieve by ourselves. If the aspiration is only big enough where any of us could do it individually, then it's not a high enough aspiration. So we think about that 1 + 1 = 5, 1 + 1 = 6, that multiplier effect from being, sort of connected to other people. So you've got to have that connection. I think the third thing and the most important thing, for me with team, and this is a word that I think is overused, but it's having that trust. Like, do you really have my back? In many ways, a team can never be a team if there's one person on it that doesn't inspire trust, the competency to do what you say you want to do, the willingness to do what you say you will do, the character and the integrity to always say the tough things to your face and not undermine you behind your back. So trust becomes a big advantage. And then I think, joy and fun, I mentioned that early on, matters. If you don't enjoy me and you don't have fun being around me, it's highly unlikely we can be overwhelmingly successful together. All of the best teams typically have a lot of joy being with each other, right? And so we talk about that a lot here at Beck. We think a lot about this notion of where do healthy teams come from. It's got to be, one, the ambition that we achieve things that are greater than we could achieve individually. So we're using everyone's individual strengths to actually make magic by making a collective that has a broader bandwidth. Two, we have a lot of understanding and affinity towards each other. Three, we have deep trust with each other. Four, we enjoy actually being and playing with each other.
So real quick on 2, 3, and 4 there, right, where we're talking about trust and affinity and understanding of each other and joy. What do you as the leader do to inspire that? How are you most capable of helping make that happen within your collection?
One of the things, Don, for me, when you were an athlete, you spent so much time with each other. The higher up you go in business, the less time you have, right? So you think about how many people would like to have a great team, and yet they don't cultivate an environment where they truly can spend time with each other. And I'm talking about formal time and informal time. As the leader, it's my job to make sure we always have carve-outs of time to actually be with each other. Whether that's monthly one-to-ones, whether that's coming over to the house on a Saturday to watch a football game together, whether that's going to play a round of golf or going to shoot some birds. Like, we have to spend time with each other, okay, in order to actually cultivate that environment. Because people that do not know each other can never truly trust each other. And people that don't trust each other can never do well together. And so we have to actually cultivate time. And I think that's the biggest challenge in a corporate environment versus a sports environment. In a sports environment, we're going to spend a lot of time with each other. We're going to have downtime on the bus. We're going to be sitting in airports. We're going to be sitting around after practice. We're going to be icing in the hot tub. So we have so much downtime to actually truly get to know each other. In business, the people responsible for the team need to find ways to cultivate environments where people get to spend a lot of time together so that they know each other, so that they can learn to trust each other.
I love that. And I can imagine that in your environment, you are constantly making sure that these piece parts are built into the schedule, because the schedule is part of that being organized and all those things that you were mentioning, learning at 15. So
yeah. Well, it's a constant ebb and flow, right? I find like whenever our team is not at its best, usually it's connected to the lack of downtime and the lack of informal time.
Right.
That when we just get transactional with each other, we are not a high-performing team. And so, yes, it's my job to make sure we're constantly cultivating ways to stay connected through that informal time. I remember once designing a building for a famous coach. We were doing a sports facility for this coach. He said, as important as my office is, more important is the break room. And I would like my break room to actually be the same shared break room as the players. In other words, I want to go get my snacks where they get their snacks, because that chance interaction, that informal time when we're both making a smoothie or a cup of coffee might be the best time for me really to break through with them relationally. It is not the formal times in team environments that really matter. It's the informal times that allow you to build that base of relationship and trust that you then leverage during the formal times.
Sounds like a pretty smart coach. So you understand the general premise of this podcast, and you and I talked about it a little earlier, just on the idea that what makes many leaders more and more capable, and one of the things that has certainly shown up is connection to athletic participation. When you're looking at candidates and you see them all the time, does it jump out at you when you see athletic participation?
Don, it's so important to me not to actually typecast people when I kind of look at, the books, but I would tell you, it just so happens that we have a lot of athletes on our team. And I don't know the magic there, but I can connect for you in this way. It is impossible to be successful without hard work, without discipline, and without tenacity. And it is no surprise to me that people who have played a lot of sports throughout their life learn the value of hard work. I always joked in my own careers, I might not be the fastest, just like I may not be the smartest, but you're going to have to work really hard to outwork me. So hard work is so important. In a career in architecture and construction, you've got to be willing to work hard. The beginning of my career, 12, 14-hour days were not uncommon.
Right.
Some people would run away from that, and some people run toward that. Tenacity. I mean, just the ability to actually take a licking and keep on ticking, to actually go into an interview for a project and lose it, but show up the next day willing to work harder to win the next one. Mm-hmm. Sports teaches you the value of winning and losing and being resilient in the face of winning and losing. The ability to accept feedback. I mean, I feel like as an architect, we have to get some harsh feedback from clients at times. I don't like this. I don't want this to work this way. You get feedback from your direct bosses. As a 22-year-old, I remember being removed from a project because I was just not, quote unquote, getting it. That would either break you. Some people might leave the firm because they get removed from a project. Or you might solicit input as to how you could do it better next time so that you're more successful. Sports teaches you the value of being receptive to being coached. So it's no question to me that at our firm, athletes tend to do very well because high-performing athletes come with a lot of that. My executive assistant is a former swimmer, former volleyball player at a university. My chief information officer is in the Soccer Hall of Fame for his university.
Wow.
My COO, who is rising, played college baseball. We have a lot of athletes on our management team, and we didn't set out for that. These are just the attributes that these people brought to the table that allowed them to elevate themselves and to find a lot of success around us.
Well, that's what we're seeing more and more. That's what we're learning more and more. And that's so encouraging. And the upside is it doesn't have to be any particular sport. It just has to be something that inspires you to push yourself beyond your limits.
Yes.
And sports do that better than most things. As a leader, I'd love to ask you a little bit about how you've applied some of these things. You mentioned about being coachable and about trying to learn. I know an important discussion for you covers inclusion, equity, and competition, and how they combine to impact the C-suite. Would you share some of your thoughts there with us?
Don, I'm really passionate about this notion that great companies, great organizations have to be inclusive. And inclusion to me doesn't mean to advantage minorities or women over majority. Inclusive means having a broad, sort of viewpoint, a broad net by which you actually can see everyone's talent regardless of what they look like and what gender they are. Inclusion for me means creating a culture where people who have different background all can feel comfortable in your culture to where they can be their true self, not their work self, but their true self when they come to your firm or your institution. So inclusion is really important for me. And it's a message we push at the very onset because we want to be very inclusive in our hiring because we want access to all talent.
So what might be a way that you would do something like that? Let's say an early stage employee joins Beck. Can you share maybe some way that you would prove to them your desire to actually have them add voice?
So, we do some very intentional things early on at Beck. One, we have an orientation program where we go through our values. I'm a big believer that firms don't have values, leaders have values. And
Right.
We talk about what we believe here at Beck, caring, integrity, things like that, where we really get into our belief structure. Then we go out and serve. We literally, the first thing you do as a new employee, as an intern, is your very first task is use your skills to go serve your community. Because we believe people who are good for themselves have to be good for others. And then it's very likely that whatever your discipline is, that you're going to have to go work in another discipline so that you actually gain empathy and you see the value of people who have different skill sets. And then finally, it's most likely you're not going to be working with people who look just like you so that you get comfortable. Sports, to me, has allowed me a life, to where you get proximate. And when I say proximate, I mean shoulder to shoulder with people and lock arms with people who have different backgrounds from you. And then you get to experience the value of your best friend who is Irish Catholic, even though you might be Afro-Caribbean. And you get to actually experience his life through his eyes and not through the eyes of judgment. You also get to understand that at a very base level, we're all human beings. The things that make you tick are probably going to be not so different from the things that make me tick. So for me, inclusion is really important because companies and organizations have to be good for everyone, and they have to be good for the communities they work in. But at a very base level, to include everyone means we're going to have much more access to talent, which absolutely is going to be great for our organization too. So at the very onset of someone's journey at Beck, we try to run them through enough experiences so that they understand the value of having diversity, having different points of view, having different skill sets, but then using all of that to serve other people.
I know from some of our conversations previously about Beck that you had a lot of coaches in sports who stressed honesty and collegiality, right? That ability to know the importance of your fellow employee or teammate or whatever you want to call it. What are some of the ways that you have worked to inspire that kind of collegiality in your professional career as you've been working to navigate your way forward?
Well, I think you have to highlight good examples when you see it. I think great culture comes from great stories. This is why I love the work that you do, storytelling. It's so important because culture is learned through stories. And we try to tell stories in our internal communications, whether through our intranet, the things we showcase, but also through our monthly newsletters. We try to tell stories to people about what integrity really means to us. Because it's easy to have these words. And I would imagine, I always say to people, construction, one of the businesses not known for integrity. Every construction firm has integrity as one of its core values.
That's the key words.
But when you think about these words, you have to say, what do these beliefs really mean to you? So integrity to us is probably the most important value when it comes to inspiring trust and to tell the stories about, the superintendent in Florida when a hurricane is coming, who battens up his house quickly, then loads up all of the supplies and drives over to less fortunate people and battens their house up because he knew they needed it more. Or to tell the story of, the young person who was overpaid, who brought that check back and said, this has been a mistake. To tell folks real life example about what their fellow employees are doing right next to them that showcases that integrity is really important. Caring is a big thing for us as well. Those are the two values we say, if you don't have those values, you're probably not going to actually have a job here at Beck. So we try to be very severe in terms of these are table stakes. And we know what caring looks like. You know it when you see it.
Right.
If you care about me, you wouldn't talk bad and poorly about me behind my back. If you cared about me, you wouldn't allow me to operate on a construction site in an unsafe manner because you know it might cost me my life or my limb. If you cared about me, you would actually insist that I continue to invest in myself and develop my professional self so that I can have the full benefit of all my talent. And if you cared about me, you absolutely would have the uncomfortable conversations to help me develop so that I might be all that I can be in life. All of those things are caring things to us. And so for us, the underlying beliefs drive the behavior drives the result. And so we We try to get down to a very base level to connect these beliefs to the actual things we do every day so that people might understand what it looks like and how it plays out.
That's a perfect transition into the question. And you and I discussed this before we began, but I know that when they actually tabbed you as the future CEO at Beck, one of the things that they did that was so special was that they planned for a transition. I think you likened it in an interview that I read to a handoff in a 4x100 relay race. And it's not just like, here it is, run. It's here it is, we'll take a few steps together as you run, right?
Yeah.
Tell me about how that transition and the time that you had with a mentor helped prepare you to take off when you became the full-time CEO.
One of the things I think we learn in sports is how to make room for other people. I think the thing that's always been attractive to me with team sports is for us to actually win, we've got to actually make room for each other. Our transition at Beck was very well scripted by my predecessor, who also happens to be my mentor. Mm-hmm. And because he had invested many years in mentoring me, this was an open conversation about the possibility to be his successor. Nothing was guaranteed. I had to continue to develop myself and to continue to work hard, but it was not a surprise to me when I was selected because he had given me enough heads up to continue to work on my development and to know that it was a possibility. The other part was our chemistry with each other. We are very different men in many ways in terms of our proclivities, but we are tightly aligned in terms of our beliefs. Mm-hmm. What we believe a good life looks like and how we should live our life, there's very little daylight between ourselves. But what our natural skill sets and proclivities are and how we do things are very different. And so we had this position that collectively, he as the chairman, I as the new CEO, we could achieve some things together that as a combined leadership team that he was not able to achieve by himself, nor would I. And also for me, and I would say this for young leaders, I became CEO when I was 37.
Wow.
I had so much confidence knowing that my chairman actually was my successor and he would not be that far away if I needed any help. It was almost done like a safety net. So by making room for each other, we absolutely got more. And for me, there are so many leaders, if it's just about you and just about the sort of acclaim that you'll receive, you actually rob yourself of extra resources. When we make room for others and when we're willing to quote unquote share the ball, we achieve so much more magic. Over that time in our transition, we doubled the size of the company and almost quadrupled the size of the EBITDA. And it was because having two leaders willing to share the ball, to make room for each other, we were able to do more, we were able to achieve more. There can be no true success in companies and in organizations without very tight, well-planned, and well-thought-out succession. Success and succession go hand in hand.
Right.
And I think it's something that we nailed here. And by the way, as CEO now, it's something I think about every day. Who will my successor be? How do I make sure that we have great succession in every key role in the firm and that we're developing 2 and 3 and 4 people deep in these roles so that more people might have the intentionality, the investment, and actually the foresight to know where their careers might take them and to know that they will have the support as they move forward.
In that relationship and in that succession, the beauty of it in part was that he'd seen early in you some potential and he was willing to kind of bring you along, even though, as you said, you didn't look alike, you didn't have anywhere near the same background, but he pulled you along and that gave you access that maybe you might not have naturally had if you had to go find another guy from the Bahamas who played basketball and became an architect. What advice would you give to people about going to find that sponsor, if you will, or that person that will be a mentor to you?
I probably would have 3 distinct words, right? Like for me, one is attraction. You have to attract people to you by how you actually perform and how you carry yourself. Attraction is really important to attract a sponsor, to attract mentorship. And to me, that means the people that you admire, the people that you're around, you have to really follow through on the things they ask you to do and they ask of you. By following through, by being disciplined, and by working hard, we attract people to our cause. The second word I would use is commitment. Commitment is a two-way street. My chairman as a mentor was deeply committed to me because I was deeply committed to him. Mm-hmm. And Don, you can feel when people are all in. You can feel when people are all in with you. If I go down, if the ship goes down, me and you are going down with the ship. But you can also feel when people are halfway in, halfway out. I say to young people all the time, this cannot be a rest stop in your career. You've got to be all in with me if you want me to be all in with you. I sense a deep commitment by my chairman towards me, which caused me to want to give that commitment the other way going. So the second word I would have is commitment. You've got to attract people, but you have to have a deep commitment towards each other. And then I think the third word would be grace. You're going to actually say things the wrong way sometimes. You're going to step on each other's toes. You might describe something in a way that irritates me, or you might do something that, I'm sure sometimes, we have irritated each other and the people around me. We're going through all of this time in American life right now where we have so much pins and needles about the position we find ourselves in socially, relative to race, relative to opportunities, so on and so forth. But if you know I have a good heart, and if you know we share the same values, and if you understand my history, then you will give me some grace, even if I say something the wrong way, or I might say something that irritates you. So when we have grace towards each other, when we're committed towards each other, and then when we live a life that is attractive to other people so that they want to be a part of our cause, you're going to inspire mentorship and you're going to inspire sponsorship. And that's the best advice I can give relative to that. And I would say these things that I'm describing, Don, is something that everyone can do.
Right.
Everyone can do these things.
Yeah. Fred, I'm attracted. I'm inspired. I'm ready to go. And I have waited the entire time to say to our listeners that you and I played basketball together at Duke. And I'm going to leave it at that and just say how impressive we were as a collective. But honored to have you here with us today. I appreciate you, sir, and can't wait to see you again one day soon.
Well, Don, thank you for everything you do to continue to tell the stories that help make a difference in the lives of so many people. We appreciate you, and thank you for giving me the audience today.
Fred's enthusiasm really inspires me. As you heard, he thrives on routines. So this week, I want to challenge you to create one for yourself. It can be something as simple as reviewing your day's priorities in the morning, making your bed, or maybe a new reflection routine with your kids. Fred was absolutely spot on when he said this: when productive routines spread throughout your life, you will see results. Thanks for listening to the show. Did you like what you heard? If so, subscribe to the podcast. We will be rolling out a new episode every Wednesday, and you can be the first to listen. Subscribe on our website, corporatecompetitorpodcast.com, or by texting subscribe to 58885, and you will receive a free chapter of one of my best-selling books. While you're there, remember to join the Greatness Community. For a free weekly leadership lesson, I write for Forbes.com and information on my live and virtual keynote speeches. Stay in touch by connecting with me on social media at Don Yeager on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Finally, are you a corporate competitor? If so, tell me the story about a time when your athletic experience taught you a leadership lesson you still use today. Until next week, I appreciate you.